Hey guys, first we're going to get out this worksheet and make sure you have it on your desk. We're going to start talking about exposition. You should also recognize this from what we have done in class. And we've talked about the exposition, which is this part right here. And this part that's circled in red is exactly what this worksheet is going to be about. Okay, so in order for us to use this worksheet, you're going to have to go to the video that I sent you in the email. And if you by chance have lost that email, you can always go to YouTube. And you can just type in Wonder Years and type in Wonder Years pilot episode, or just pilot. And you can click on any one of those. You're going to need to watch about the first 6.5 minutes of that clip, and then pause this while you do it. Okay guys, so now that you have watched this video, we're going to talk about how these characters and how the setting makes a difference for the story. Okay, so let's look at this worksheet. First, we're going to talk about the setting. So you will need to fill out just this top part right here. I'll have you fill it out, fill in your answers. If you need to look at the video again, you can go back and do that. And then pause this before you go on to the next section, and we will go over the answers together. Okay, did you fill out the top portion about the setting, which is part of what is learned in the exposition? Did you? Don't you dare go on to the next portion if you haven't. Don't even think about it. No, not for a single second. If you have finished the setting section, keep watching. If not, hit pause right now and finish it. Okay, so since you have finished the setting section, let's look at what you might have written for some of these things. So you might have heard that they said this takes place when? In 1968. And that marker is way too fat, so let's see if we can erase this. Okay, try again. In 1968. And you might have heard that this took place in the suburbs. And in case you're not entirely certain about the suburbs, it just means an outer area, not directly in the city. The next part asks you to think about the images from the time period that are shown in the beginning. And what do they suggest about the time period in American history? Okay, so you might have seen pictures of things with race and change. For instance, there was an image of Dr. Martin Luther King, and I don't know if you know who that is, but he represents a lot of change in American history for races. And there were a lot of images of revolution and things, people protesting and wanting things to be different and change. And so what we're most going to talk about with this episode is with some of the images that they showed, what they suggest is that there's a lot of change going on in there. And that's exactly what that's meant to mean about this family, that there's going to be a lot of change happening in this episode, especially in the main characters that we're going to talk about in a little bit. Okay, and so now we're ready to look at characterization, because characterization is the second part that at least the characters are what we're introduced to in the exposition. So in the exposition, they tell us about the setting, and then they start talking about the characters so that we as the audience get to know them. And it's the same in books. Okay, so here's how we're going to do this. For this worksheet, you're going to look at each character, and we're going to fill it out straight across from left to right. Okay, so we're going to look at Kevin first. And it tells us right here that we're looking at words to describe this character based on the info in the exposition. So in the exposition, we learn a lot about Kevin. And one of the words you might have chosen to describe him is confident. So maybe you chose confident to describe him. And we might look at the next part, which says, what told us this? Actions, descriptions, words. When we start thinking about why we would consider Kevin confident, I could say, well, there's a part in the beginning where he says, I don't mind saying I was a pretty good little athlete. Of course, he drops the ball after that, but it's meant to be funny, and he does say some things about himself where the audience is supposed to be thinking, okay, this guy's pretty confident in what he's saying, what he's doing, and who he is. So we chose confident, and you can use that quote where you said, I don't mind saying that I was a pretty good little athlete. Okay, now the next part asks us to look at what does the information we get in the exposition suggest about them for later throughout this series. Now, we don't have this information yet. It's just asking us to speculate, to guess what it might suggest about them. And it says in school here. So if we know that Kevin is confident, or we said that he was confident, in school, what does confident look like? He's probably involved. He might speak up when he's called on. He's probably not afraid to raise his hand. So we're being asked to think about what he could be like later. We're making a guess, a prediction about what kind of person he would be. Okay, and the last part says the type of characterization. Now, it tells us 4 different things that we can pick from. 1, is it the character's own thoughts, speech, or actions? 2, is it another character or some other person involved here? Is it their physical appearance, or is it a narrator's comments? So we have to go back and think. This confident, we said, I don't mind, and he says, I don't mind saying I was a pretty good little athlete. Now we have to think, which of these 4 types of characterization is this statement? So we have, let's look at the way to narrow this down. Character's own thoughts, speech, or actions. Possibly, yes, because he's talking about himself. Or is it another character's? No one else is saying, I don't mind. We know it's him saying about himself. It's definitely has something about his physical appearance. But the last one I want you to think about is the narrator's comments. In this particular show, we have a narrator, and we happen to have Kevin himself as the 12-year-old. The narrator, in case you haven't figured it out, is him as an older person narrating his story about himself when he was 12. In this, we're going to call this narrator's comments, because this narrator is a different person than the 12-year-old who is sometimes speaking to his brother, who is sometimes speaking to his mother, etc. So here, we're going to write narrator's comments.